The room mocked her silence before they saw her strength. It started the moment she stepped across the threshold, boots hitting the floor with the same steady rhythm she carried into every challenge she faced. She felt the shift in the air before she even looked up. The quick glances, the smirks passed back and forth, the kind of quiet laughter people think is subtle when they have never been the target of it. She moved forward anyway. She always did. They expected hesitation. They expected a recruit who second-guessed every step. Instead, they got someone who scanned the room with the sharp focus of a person trained by life to read everything except sound. She saw the curled lips, the nudges, the way two trainees at the back were already mimicking hand signs behind her. They thought they were clever. They thought they were hidden. People underestimate how visible their mockery becomes when the person they aim it at has learned to study faces like maps. She caught every detail without breaking stride. She took her seat in the front row, not because she wanted attention, but because it gave her the clearest view of the instructors, the board, the layout, and every potential exit. Old habits. Necessary habits. She positioned herself where her lines of sight were clean and nothing important could slip past her. Predictably, more whispers rose behind her like a wave. Someone muttered that she should be in a different program. Someone else joked that they would need subtitles during missions. She didn't flinch. Not externally. Internally, she filed it away the same way she filed wind direction, terrain shifts, and unstable footing. Noted. Stored. Irrelevant until proven otherwise. The instructor walked in and began the briefing. His voice rolled through the room, and she watched his mouth move, her eyes locked on each shape and shift. Years of practice made lip reading feel natural, not forced. She tracked him better than half the room, who were already drifting, bored, or yawning into their sleeves. But they weren't watching her, so they missed the way her fingers twitched small signs against her thigh as she translated details into muscle memory. Language was a tool. Silence was another. Both gave her an advantage none of them recognized. When the instructor explained the parameters of the simulation, she noticed something he didn't say aloud. A tactical omission. A small gap. It caught her attention instantly. She replayed his mouth movements in her mind, checking herself. No, she hadn't imagined it. There was a missing piece, something intentional, something designed to test awareness. She made a mental mark on it. The trainees behind her were too busy making jokes about how she probably missed half the instructions. She didn't bother correcting them. Their assumptions were weaknesses that belonged to them, not her. During the equipment distribution, one of the louder mockers stepped beside her and muttered, loud enough for others to hear, that they hoped she wouldn't get them killed. She didn't respond. She simply adjusted her gear with smooth, economical movements that looked more polished than theirs. Years of adaptive training had conditioned her hands to operate with precision even when the world around her felt like static. She could assemble and disassemble tools faster than most recruits who depended on sound cues. They thought her silence meant fragility. They had no idea that silence had been her crucible. When they moved to the staging area, she caught another set of eyes drifting to her hands as she signed a reminder to herself. They snickered again. The strange part was that they weren't even creative with their mockery. Same gestures, same predictable comments, same tired assumptions. If anything, their reactions revealed more about their own blind spots than anything about the reality of her abilities. She ripped open a packet of tactical gloves and slipped them on, her fingers adjusting the fit with practiced precision that none of them recognized as the result of discipline they had never needed to build. The instructors gave the final pre-mission directions. She absorbed every detail, not missing a single shift of expression or brief pause in their delivery. The others fixated on the words alone. She read everything else, the microsignals beneath them. When they broke into small teams, she felt the tension rise. Some recruits stiffened at the idea of being paired with her. A few tried to switch groups. Their discomfort sat in the air like heat off pavement. She let it sit. She had learned long ago that acceptance offered too soon only encouraged disrespect. Let them be uneasy. Let them underestimate her. Let them think silence meant weakness. Let them think they had already figured her out. Sign language became her tactical edge. At first, no one saw it that way. They treated it like a limitation, a barrier she would constantly struggle to work around. But she knew what her hands were capable of long before she stepped into that training compound. She had trained them to move with precision, speed, and purpose. Each gesture carried intent. Each motion carried information. Where others relied on sound, she relied on clarity. And in high-pressure environments, clarity usually won. During early drills, the team stumbled whenever chaos spiked. Voices overlapped. Orders tangled in the noise. People talked over each other, shouted corrections, misheard instructions, and tripped over mixed signals. She watched it all unfold with a kind of detached understanding. Sound, for them, was supposed to be an advantage, yet it became noise pollution. They were so used to speaking that they assumed communication ended when their voices rose. She knew better. She had to. She approached every drill with the same mindset she carried into the rest of her life. Adapt, observe, execute. While they yelled across the field, she watched body angles, foot placement, and subtle shifts in posture. Where they struggled to hear instructions over the chaos, she caught the meaning in motion. She read intent before sound even left their mouths. It made her faster. It made her more deliberate. And slowly, her hands became the most accurate communication tool in the room. One afternoon, during a navigation exercise, the group hit a dead zone. Radios glitched. The instructor had warned them that equipment failure was part of the test, but no one expected it this early. Voices rose instantly, everyone trying to shout new plans at once. She lifted her hands and signed a simple directive to the two teammates closest to her. They paused. They knew the basics of sign from orientation, but they had treated it like trivia, something they would never need. Now, the message landed clean and calm. Move left. Hold position. Assess. She repeated the sequence, sharper this time. One of the teammates hesitated, then followed. The other copied the movement. No noise. No confusion. Just action. When the instructor reviewed the footage later, he paused at that moment. Her hands cut through the mess like a blade. While the others scrambled to control the situation, she controlled communication. In combat simulations, she discovered another advantage. Sound carried. Footsteps echoed. Words bounced off walls and signaled their position long before they realized it. But her hands moved silently. Her commands stayed between her and the person receiving them. No enemy would ever hear her say move or flank or now. Silence became a shield. Sign language became a weapon. She used it to signal warnings her teammates almost missed. A shift in the tree line. A shadow between two crates. A reflection off a distant scope. She tapped a shoulder, signed fast, and her teammate ducked before the simulation sensor registered a hit. He looked at her for the first time without ridicule. There was something sharper there now. Something closer to respect. Later in the obstacle course, when the group reached a narrow crawl space, sound became useless. Voices muffled instantly. Orders died in the dirt. She slid forward, tapping boots ahead of her, signing directions in small movements that fit the tight space. Her teammates relied on those movements without hesitation. It was the first time they followed her without question. Her hands turned communication into choreography. No one mistook it for weakness after that. During night exercises, when darkness erased detail and whispers risked detection, her signing became their primary method of staying coordinated. She taught her team quick signals to cover blind spots, track targets, and adjust pace. They picked it up faster than expected, not because they suddenly cared, but because they realized her system worked better than what they had been taught. It felt strange at first, being the person others depended on for clarity. She had spent most of her life being the one people assumed needed help. But here, in the field, the roles reversed. They relied on her hands for accuracy, for direction, for survival within the simulation. No one mocked her signing after they watched her communicate cleanly through conditions that shut everyone else down. No one questioned her skills when they saw her relay information faster than the people yelling themselves hoarse. And no one doubted her anymore when they realized sign language didn't make her less capable. It made her the only one who could operate at full strength when the world around them turned wild, loud, or silent. Without warning, doubt fueled her discipline. It had been that way long before she entered the program. Doubt was the first thing she ever learned to navigate. It showed up in looks, in assumptions, in conversations people had about her right in front of her because they thought she wouldn't notice. It shaped the way teachers graded her, the way classmates treated her, the way strangers hesitated before they spoke to her. Instead of letting it break her, she used it. Every dismissive expression became a spark. Every lowered expectation became a target. Every whispered comment became another reason to build herself stronger than anyone predicted. When she entered training, the doubt followed her in like a shadow. She expected that. She knew the routine. Someone would assume she couldn't keep up. Someone would think she was fragile. Someone would misinterpret silence as weakness. What they didn't understand was that she had spent years shaping that silence into something sharp. She had turned it into a fuel source. For her, doubt wasn't a barrier. It was an accelerant. The first week of training hit hard. Physical drills, mental tests, tactical simulations, assessments that pushed everyone to the edge. She watched recruits fold under the pressure, not because they were weak, but because they had never needed to push past other people's assumptions. They had coasted through life with the benefit of being taken seriously. She had not. She kept her pace steady, her breathing even, her focus locked. Every time she felt fatigue creep in, she remembered every moment someone had written her off. It triggered something in her. A refusal. A quiet, unshakable refusal to let anyone else dictate her limits. During conditioning, instructors tracked reactions closely. Who panicked? Who hesitated? Who broke form? She kept her movements sharp and economical. No wasted effort. No frantic scrambling. She didn't have the luxury of letting her mind scatter. Doubt had taught her discipline early. Discipline had taught her control. Control became her foundation. The others trained because they wanted to prove their strength. She trained because she had been forced to prove her existence. She couldn't afford to show strain the way they did. If they stumbled, no one questioned their potential. If she stumbled, they would use it as evidence. So she trained with intention. She monitored her muscles, her breathing, her speed. She pushed herself to understand not just how to execute a task, but how to master it. Not just how to run faster, but how to conserve energy. Not just how to fight harder, but how to strike smarter. In tactical classes, she stayed longer than required, reviewing drills others thought they had already mastered. She replayed mistakes until they were gone. She broke down movements until they became reflex. She practiced hand signals until they flowed out of her without thought. This was how she operated. Quiet repetition, precise improvement, unrelenting discipline shaped by every doubt she had absorbed since she was young. She noticed a pattern in the way her peers trained. When instructors praised them, they performed better. When instructors criticized them, they faltered. Their confidence lived and died on external approval. Hers didn't. Hers had been built in silence. It didn't rely on applause. It didn't crumble under criticism. It existed because she had forged it in the space where no one expected greatness from her. Doubt had carved her into someone who could function under pressure without waiting for validation. During one simulation, her team fell apart halfway through the exercise. Noise, panic, wrong calls, misread directions. The moment chaos hit, she shifted gears. Her mind didn't scatter. It tightened. Doubt had trained her to stay calm when others drifted. She scanned their positions, calculated the pattern, and executed. She adjusted her pace, corrected angles, and moved with deliberate control until she brought the team back on track. By the time they reached the end point, the instructor marked her as the only one who showed escalating precision instead of declining focus under pressure. Her peers tried to understand how she stayed composed. They assumed she didn't feel fear. They assumed she didn't get overwhelmed. They didn't realize the truth. She felt everything: fear, frustration, exhaustion. But she had spent her whole life learning how to build structure under pressure. Doubt forced her to. Doubt required her to. So when the recruits around her questioned her capabilities, she didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She let their skepticism pour into the same reservoir she had carried since childhood. A reservoir she drew from during every long run, every punishing drill, every moment her muscles burned and her lungs protested. Doubt became the energy she tapped when everything else ran out. It shaped her focus. It hardened her resolve. It kept her moving when others slowed. SEAL-style focus flipped the power dynamic. It happened slowly at first, then all at once. She had always trained with intention, but once she applied the discipline she learned from studying SEAL tactics, everything about her presence shifted. SEALs trained to stay calm under pressure, to think 3 steps ahead, to act with precision even when adrenaline spikes hard enough to shake most people off their center. She studied that mindset until it became her own. And as soon as she brought that level of focus into the training grounds, the people who used to mock her started noticing the change long before they admitted it. The others approached drills with loud confidence. They thrived on hype, on cheering each other on competing with noise. She approached drills like she approached everything else. Quiet, calculated, purposeful. She broke down each task into patterns. She tracked weaknesses and strengths. She didn't react. She didn't rush. She didn't let emotion spill into the moment. That kind of control unnerved people who relied on volume to feel powerful. Her silence used to make her a target. Once she sharpened it, her silence made other recruits second-guess themselves. She started outperforming them in areas they assumed she would fail. Not because she moved the fastest, but because she moved with strategy. While others burned out early trying to set a fast pace, she managed her energy. While they lost focus mid-course, she stayed locked in. While they hesitated during decision points, she made her choices cleanly because she had already analyzed the terrain, the angles, and the possibilities. Her mind didn't scatter. It stacked information neatly, even under pressure. In team simulations, the instructors rotated leadership responsibilities. Whenever it was her turn, the shift in atmosphere was immediate. Her teammates expected chaos. They expected her to crumble. Instead, she treated the mission briefing like an equation. She read the room, read the objective, and built a plan. She didn't waste words. She delivered instructions with clarity and minimal movement. Her teammates didn't always like it, but they couldn't deny how well it worked. While other leaders barked orders, she directed with gestures and precise timing. She noticed details they overlooked. The direction of shadows. The pattern of movement in the brush. The position of simulated hostiles who used noise to track squads that relied too heavily on shouting. Her team moved differently under her leadership. Steadier, quieter, smarter. They completed objectives faster because her focus didn't waver. What they didn't realize was that SEAL-style discipline didn't come from brute strength. It came from control. Breath control, thought control, movement control. She trained herself to breathe evenly when others panicked. She trained herself to remain aware of her surroundings even when fatigue hit its highest point. She trained herself to separate urgency from recklessness. That was the kind of focus the elite forces lived by. And when she brought that mindset into the program, it changed the dynamic without a single word. One simulation drove the point home. The scenario was designed to overwhelm. Loud alarms, flashing lights, high-pressure decision points. Recruits were expected to make rapid calls while navigating an unpredictable environment. Most teams froze or collapsed into disorganized yelling. Her team started slipping too. Voices rose. Panic spread. She stepped in with steady hands, clear signs, and calm eyes. She directed them through the chaos, using a sequence of signals that cut through the noise instantly. She didn't just stay calm. She transferred that calm to the people around her. SEALs learn that control is contagious. Panic spreads fast, but so does focus. Her team refocused because she did not give them space to unravel. She pointed. She signaled. She moved with intention. By the time they reached the extraction point, the instructor noted that her team was one of the few that never lost operational structure. Her peers didn't want to respect her, but performance forced their hand. They could ignore her silence. They could ignore her signing. They could ignore her disability. They couldn't ignore consistent results. They couldn't ignore the way she executed tactics cleaner than recruits who boasted about being natural leaders. They couldn't ignore the fact that she outperformed them without ever needing to raise her voice. One by one, the same people who rolled their eyes at her began watching her during drills, observing her technique, copying her pacing. picking up bits of her strategy. The more she excelled, the more the early power imbalance crumbled. It wasn't just her confidence rising. It was their certainty shrinking. They had built their sense of superiority on assumptions about her limitations. When every assumption fell apart under pressure, the hierarchy shifted. Her focus became the quiet force that reorganized the entire group. Their loud bravado didn't lead anymore. Her controlled discipline did. And every time she stepped forward during training, every time she remained composed while others cracked, the gap between what they thought she was and who she actually was grew wider. The mission exposed who was truly prepared. Everyone walked into it thinking they knew their strengths. They thought they understood pressure. They believed the drills had shaped them enough to handle whatever the instructors threw their way. Confidence filled the air before the simulation even started. Some of it was earned. Most of it was noise. She didn't join in. She stood at the edge of the group, steady and focused, watching details the others missed. Her preparation had never been loud. It lived in repetition, discipline, and the quiet work she did long after the others had gone to rest. The instructors set the tone fast. The scenario wouldn't follow a clean pattern. It wouldn't mirror any single drill they had rehearsed. It was built to break habits, to push reactions to the edge, to strip away ego until only skill remained. As soon as the first marker sounded, the recruits launched forward in a rush. They relied on adrenaline. They relied on instinct. She relied on analysis. She studied the terrain, the direction of movement, and the first cluster of alerts. While the others sprinted without a plan, she charted a path. Within minutes, the cracks showed. A recruit tripped on uneven ground because he charged too fast. Another shouted an order that no one heard clearly. A third argued with his teammate about which direction to take. Energy scattered like stray sparks. The instructors watched from the monitors, noting every misstep. She didn't get pulled into the chaos. She stayed low, moved efficiently, and stayed aware of the rhythm of the mission. SEAL tactics had taught her that rushing was a rookie mistake. Strategy beat speed every time. Her team collapsed into noise early on. They tried to compensate for fear by yelling louder and moving faster. The problem was that yelling didn't make the mission easier. It only made them easier to track. She watched their panic build. She felt it ripple through the air like static. Instead of joining their frantic energy, she anchored herself in the discipline she had trained for. She used hand signals to cut through confusion, pointing out angles and gaps they missed. At first they resisted. Old habits, old mindsets. But when her signs saved them from walking into an ambush trigger, they hesitated long enough to realize she knew what she was doing. The mission shifted into a close-quarters phase where communication had to be sharp and movement had to be controlled. This was where most recruits cracked. The space was tight. Visibility dropped. Sound bounced off walls in ways that distorted meaning. Voices stopped helping and started betraying position. She moved through it like she had been trained for moments exactly like this. Silence helped her. Awareness guided her. Every shadow, every flicker of motion, every shift in weight from the recruits around her fed her understanding of what was happening. She positioned herself where she could see the most, and she passed information through quick, precise gestures. Her teammates, who had been sliding toward panic, began to mirror her calm without even realizing it. This mission didn't reward the loudest. It rewarded the most controlled. And she had been building that control long before this day. The louder recruits struggled to keep their breathing steady as tension climbed. She kept hers even. She felt her pulse rise, but didn't let it dictate her decisions. She stayed in the moment, in the task, in the assessment. Halfway through, the simulation introduced unexpected environmental hazards. Flickering lights, sudden temperature drops, mechanical noise meant to rattle focus. Most recruits reacted instantly, jumping, flinching, or losing momentum. She treated each shift like data. Adjust, reassess, continue. It wasn't that she didn't feel pressure. It was that pressure didn't get to lead her. The instructors tracked physiological responses, and hers stayed more consistent than almost anyone else's. By the time they reached the objective extraction point, the difference between preparation built on ego and preparation built on discipline was visible in every movement. Some recruits arrived shaking. Some arrived winded. Some arrived frustrated at their own performance. She arrived steady. She wasn't untouched by the mission, but she was controlled, focused, effective. The instructors reviewed the footage later with the entire group present. They paused moments where recruits lost composure. They highlighted sloppy decisions. And without announcing it, they played the clips where she corrected course, guided her team, and navigated sections that had thrown others into panic. Her name wasn't called. No speech was made in her honor. But everyone saw it. Everyone recognized who had actually been ready. The mission didn't just reveal skill. It revealed truth. And truth had a way of cutting through every assumption people had walked in with. Respect replaced ridicule. It didn't happen in a dramatic moment. It didn't arrive with applause or apologies. It came quietly, the same way their mockery once had. A shift in posture. A longer look when she spoke with her hands. A hesitation before someone dismissed her. Small changes, almost invisible, but she noticed every one of them. She had always been good at reading what people try to hide. Now she watched the same recruits who once laughed at her begin to recalibrate their view, trying to understand how they had misread her so badly. It started after the mission review. The room had been filled with tension as the instructors played the footage. Mistakes, missteps, panic, and poor judgment appeared on the screen for everyone to see. When her moments showed up, the room changed. No one smirked. No one whispered. There was a strange quiet that wasn't born out of mockery this time. It was recognition. Her focus under pressure. Her ability to read danger before it unfolded. Her precision in directing her team without ever raising her voice. These things forced them to rethink everything they thought they knew about her. After the session, two recruits who had spent the first week mocking her avoided eye contact. One of them almost said something before walking away, unsure how to start a sentence he never imagined needing to say. That was the first sign. Not respect shown openly, but arrogance shrinking. It was a start. During drills the following day, the shift became more noticeable. People watched her hands, not to imitate mockingly, but to understand. They asked questions. Not many, and not confidently, but enough to make her pause. One asked if a certain sign meant what they thought it did. Another asked how she managed to coordinate under stress without losing clarity. They tried to mask their curiosity behind casual tones, but their eyes gave them away. Genuine interest replaced the earlier condescension. It wasn't lost on her how strange it felt. She had spent her life being told what she couldn't do. Now they were trying to figure out how she did what they couldn't. She kept her responses simple. She didn't try to impress them. She didn't try to soften the past. She let her work speak the way it always had, through action, not noise. On the course, the instructors paired her with recruits who needed to strengthen their control under pressure. At first, she expected resistance. Instead, she saw something else. Awareness. The recruits tried to match her pace. They tried to model her breathing. They paid attention to how she scanned the environment. One even asked if she could show them how to keep their mind steady during rapid shifts. She didn't expect that question, especially not from someone who had once joked she shouldn't be in the program. She considered him for a moment, then gave him the same answer she gave herself every day. Structure, repetition, intent. He nodded like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. Later, during a team movement simulation, one of the loudest mockers fell behind. Panic caught up with him. His breathing turned shallow, his footing uneven. She noticed it instantly. She didn't embarrass him. She didn't call attention to his fear. She simply moved closer, tapped his shoulder, and signed a steadying cue. Breathe. Focus. Ground. He followed it. The panic eased. The team completed the run. Afterward, he approached her with his helmet under his arm and hands shoved in his pockets. He didn't apologize, but he nodded once. A quiet, awkward acknowledgement. It wasn't everything, but it was honest. Respect grew stronger during night training. Her team relied on her more naturally now, not because they viewed her as a novelty, but because they understood her value. They trusted her direction. They watched for her signals. They even adjusted their own communication style to reduce noise and confusion. When one recruit missed a sign in the dark and another teammate corrected him with the proper gesture, she caught the moment and felt something tighten in her chest. Not pride, something steadier, something like validation without the need for praise. Over time, even the instructors began treating her differently. They never underestimated her to begin with, but now they used her strengths as a reference point. When explaining the importance of observation, they pointed at her approach. When teaching silence-based movement, they cited her efficiency. They didn't elevate her above the others, but they let her performance stand as proof of what discipline, clarity, and strategic focus could achieve. The recruits who once laughed at her hands moving through the air now glanced toward her before shouting an order. They checked her reaction before making a call. They no longer questioned why she was in the program. They questioned how they ever thought she didn't belong. Respect didn't arrive with fanfare. It arrived through quiet shifts in behavior, through actions that spoke louder than the mockery that had once followed her, through the simple truth that skill, discipline, and purpose outlast every assumption people make before they have the facts.